Hi, I'm LadyJenevia. I am pleasantly surprised by how many people have tuned in to my Glass Onion video essay, considering how few turned up when I first posted my 4-part Knives Out video essay, and also just how quickly I was rushing and in a hurry to make that Glass Onion video essay, but I am grateful nonetheless. Now that the film has had its wide release on Netflix, I wanted to do a brief follow-up to talk about some of the archetypes I've noticed across both Glass Onion and Knives Out. Of course, it should go without saying that if you have not seen these films, you should click off of this video and go watch them before coming back, since it would completely ruin the magic of a great original whodunit story to know who did it before you've already seen the story.
Who hired you?
I do not know.
You will have every opportunity to rewatch them, so you might as well keep your first viewing unspoiled. If you find that you enjoy this video and would like to see more from me, consider subscribing, since I'm going to be doing a very quick top 10 list, sharing my favorite films of the year, except it's actually going to be a list of 15 instead of 10 because I really love movies. Now that I've stalled long enough for the people who have not seen Glass Onion to click off, on to the main event. One of the reasons why I felt this increasing need to share some thoughts about some of the similar archetypes I noticed across both of these films is because I was watching a lot of interview clips to find pieces to include in my Glass Onion video essay that I already posted, and I noticed that different talent kept saying that the stories are different. I do agree that they're different, but hearing multiple people say that they're different back to back, combined with how closely I examine these films because they're whodunits that ask you to pay close attention to them, and then also combine that with the fact that I make YouTube videos reviewing and analyzing films and television series, it was kind of inevitable that I was going to pick up on a few things. My pointing out the existence of these archetypes, or even postulating this as a theory, is not a criticism of either one of these films. I do not think that Glass Onion is derivative of Knives Out. I think it is completely natural for certain tendencies to be recurring across a particular storyteller's body of work. Right now, my most viewed video on my channel is a video essay examining the women of Zack Snyder's filmography, and in that video essay, I have 3 main points that I chose to discuss that were different recurring patterns across his filmography of how he characterizes his female characters. Some other examples: Baz Luhrmann loves a tragic ending. James Cameron loves to have men die for the women they love. Patterns in their storytelling are merely a window into their point of view. Of course, Benoit Blanc is a central figure across both of these films, as is any main detective in a whodunit series, so I do not count him as an archetype across Rian Johnson's whodunits. Jessica Fletcher, Poirot, Miss Marple, Sherlock Holmes, those are the figureheads of the genre. And Benoit Blanc has now earned his spot alongside them. But now we can start to get into the cross comparisons. We will do the big ones first. Marta Cabrera and Helen Brand. The protagonists, the heroines, both of them come from identity groups that are marginalized by the status quo. Marta is an immigrant, though an ongoing joke in that film is that her exact country of origin is never explicitly stated, and the Drysdales certainly don't know.
Family's from Ecuador.
Marta, your family is from Uruguay.
You're a Brazilian nurse. Are you goddamn insane?
We can probably presume, though, that it's somewhere from Latin America or the Caribbean, because I don't think this family would be nearly as bigoted as they are towards her if she was from Spain. Helen, on the other hand, is a black woman. So racism, xenophobia, these types of bigotry are strongly associated with these wealthy, privileged characters, especially the villains, and it's all tightly woven into the types of themes and socio-political commentary that Rian Johnson likes to integrate into these stories. Both women are shown to be closely associated with Benoit Blanc while he is investigating the main pool of suspects, though Marta is trying to cover her tracks and Helen is just trying to help him investigate. The motivation for both of these women to accompany Benoit Blanc is their love for a family member. Marta is worried about her mother being an undocumented immigrant, and Helen wants to get justice for her sister Andy. They are also the ones who find an essential clue at the very last minute. They are the ones who take action at the end of the story to deliver the justice that the narrative demands. Even if Benoit Blanc is the one to put a lot of the clues together and to reveal most of the information the audience has been hungry to learn, the final dramatic punch punch is always delivered by these women. Marta is able to successfully lie long enough to get Ransom's confession caught on the record, and Helen blows up Miles's glass onion and destroys the Mona Lisa. Let's be real here, though. Helen delivered the significantly more entertaining conclusion. Every time she smashed up another expensive possession of his, my serotonin levels skyrocketed. What a rush. And of course, there are the similar final shots of our heroines looking triumphant. Now, if I wanted to be excessive, I could have drawn a lot more parallels across these women's stories, but this video is not the parallels of Marta Cabrera and Helen Brand video. It's about presenting several examples across both films. So that brings us to the villains, the killers, Ransom Drysdale and Miles Braun. Their similarities go far beyond the superficial exterior of them both being rich, white men. Most of the characters in both of these films are white, and that's a whole other tangent in and of itself. But both of these men are wealthy, with much of that wealth coming from the labor of other people who are better than them. They're actually quite different in the sense that Ransom's key characteristic is that he's just like Harlan, in that they are both clever in their ability to have these big, elaborate murder plots pop up into their head.
Well, Dad said the plots just popped into his head, fully formed.
And a plan forms.
Ransom is smart enough that he could have done any number of things. Miles Braun, however...
Miles Braun is an idiot.
Those characteristics of theirs are extremely integral to being able to figure out that they are the killer. Once you realize how clever Ransom is, you realize that he is perfectly capable of orchestrating the murder plot. Once you realize that Miles Braun is an idiot, he has to be the murderer.
Miles Braun is not an idiot. To risk committing murder after a very public court case, with the possibility of that email of Andy's coming to light, would be an exceedingly stupid thing to do.
Both of these men are greedy, privileged, and entitled. They want to reap the benefits of the labor of others. The eat the rich sentiment is very strong in both stories, so that theme does have its role in figuring out that they are the killers, but it's not necessarily enough on its own to identify them specifically. Though in Miles' case, in hindsight, it does feel painfully obvious. With Ransom, that entire family wanted Harlan's fortune, and they were all similar levels of generational wealth. But the eat the rich sentiment is important to keep in mind, because I think money is often a strong motivating factor in murders, and unless Ryan decides to pull a switch up for the drama of it all, and pick a motive somewhere in the vicinity of love, sex, and jealousy, it might be a useful clue to determining the killer of his next whodunit. Next we have the blondes who just want to have fun and money. Joni Thromby and Birdie J. On a superficial glance, you can clearly see that they are both blonde comedy queens with beachy waves dancing around. They are two of the funnier characters in their ensembles, though I would say that Birdie was absolutely the funniest character of her ensemble, and it wasn't even close. But in the Knives Out ensemble, Walt was the funniest because anyone trying to out-funny Michael Shannon is going to look like Steve Urkel trying to beat Muhammad Ali in boxing during Ali's prime.
Hey, maybe Harlan left you a cold glass of milk in his will, asshole.
They both have their own businesses, though those businesses aren't necessarily an indication that they are particularly clever or business savvy, since both of these women are still extremely reliant on someone else's fortune. Both of these characters have another archetype in their orbit, one that I will refer to as the pretend ally, Meg Thromby and Peg. These are women who are noticeably younger than most of the ensemble, and yet they have to be a sort of wrangler of their mother/boss. At first glance, you might think that they're on the correct side of the morality within the dramatic narrative, that they are an ally to the cause, but neither of them are. When it really counts, they will not take action that needs to be taken. Meg can huff and puff about how terrible it is for these cops to call Marta the help, but what exactly did she do the second she found out her tuition money was about to disappear? Side with her family, side with the status quo, and try to pressure Marta into giving back the inheritance. Like I said, a fake ally. Then there's Peg, who stays shackled to the sinking ship that is Birdie J. She might try to act like she has no other options, But with all of these rich and famous people she will have undoubtedly rubbed elbows with in her time working for Birdie. You mean to tell me she has no other options for employment or professional upward mobility? You'll see Peg looking really impressed when Helen is popping off on everyone, or looking like she feels guilty or uncomfortable because of the injustice that was done to Andy, but ultimately she is a coward who wants to be accepted by the status quo, which is why she's out here writing her name on her cup with a Sharpie. A fake ally and a clown. From second youngest to youngest, we have the internet-fixated Gen Z archetype. This is when the archetypes and similarities start to become a bit more loose. Jacob Thromby is a demon, and Whiskey is not. But they are a window into a particular generation and the social media culture at large. Jacob is...
he's an alt-right troll dipshit.
And Whiskey is more than willing to play a questionable role on Duke's Twitch for internet clout.
I love my boobs. They're so much fun. Oops. Sorry, feminist.
Sorry, feminist.
This whole notion of her trying to use this internet clout as a launching pad for a political career feels very underdeveloped in my opinion. It would have made more sense for her to be transitioning into becoming a right-wing grifter doing billionaire-funded commentary on the internet to drum up rage in a fake culture war. I won't name names as examples of that concept because I don't want the inevitable headache that would come from doing so. But yeah, even if the association is loose, I still feel pretty secure lumping these two characters together for this section of this video topic. Now is when we can very quickly go through some of the much smaller parallels because most of these do not require much in the way of discussion. First up, the Golden Girl. Juanetta Thromby and Ma Cody. Hilarious, scene-stealing older women.
We've been over this a million times. I told you when me and Whiskey are live, you gotta let us do...
You tell your mother to shut up.
They don't have to do much to command the spotlight, a simple chuckle or a one-liner in the background, and you just can't help but love them for it.
N, maybe stands for something? Maybe in one of the other puzzles?
It's a compass.
Ma!
Expecting to hear it all.
Freaking Miles, man. Genius.
That first one's a Fibonacci sequence.
Ma!
Next one is Noah Segan, Trooper Wagner, and Daryl. Though they might be some of the smallest characters in the ensemble, they're still funny. I don't do cops, and I don't do Mary Jane, but I do think Trooper Wagner is the funnier character of these two.
Enter Benoit Blanc.
Benny, look, I hear what you're saying, but just...
I don't mind that he's getting these gigs because he's friends with Ryan, because he adds a bit more entertainment and he's not taking anything away from what else is happening in the larger story.
Just our gang, just us.
Hey!
Hey, bro.
Not here.
An even smaller presence in both of these films is the Joseph Gordon-Levitt cameos, Detective Hard Rock and the Hourly Dong.
You slashed his face open, you left him bleeding in a street like a stuck pig, then you crushed his skull with a forklift and burned his hands off to erase the fingerprints.
Well, what is that? That's the Hourly Dong.
I am very curious to see if Joseph Gordon-Levitt will ever be cast in one of Rian Johnson's Whodunits as a character in the main ensemble. If that ever does happen, I really hope Ryan also casts Julia Stiles purely so I can scream about it, being a 10 Things I Hate About You reunion. Ryan already delivered me a How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days reunion in Glass Onion with Kate Hudson and Kathryn Hahn, so he might as well do another one.
I hate it when she pops her head in like that.
I heard that.
Now is when we are scraping the last remnants, and I don't think these characters line up with each other as easily as some of these others have. We have 3 characters from each main ensemble. There is Linda Drysdale, Richard Drysdale, and Walt Thromby from Knives Out, and Claire DeBella, Lionel Toussaint, and Duke Cody from Glass Onion. 1 woman and 2 men each. Trying to lump Linda and Claire into a similar archetype or a category is a bit of a stretch. I wouldn't really do that. Linda's known for these really bold outfits and Claire is nothing but beige. That's partially a reference to their wardrobe and partially a reference to just their general presence in their respective ensembles. But for as little as these two work in some sort of forced category, it's even more impossible to try to match up the remaining men. Neither of these men from Glass Onion is even remotely comparable to Walt, and yes, I am biased because I think Michael Shannon is a very funny performer. One of his improvised lines from Knives Out was going viral yet again online because he's just that funny.
How about some more cookies, you? You want some more cookies?
I think Duke is actually sort of maybe slightly kind of matched with Fran from Knives Out because they are the secondary murder victims in the larger narrative, but that's really the only similarity that they have. The lack of being able to perfectly align every single character from the main ensembles of each film are further proof to what I said earlier, which is that I do not think that Glass Onion is derivative of Knives Out. Having said that, though, these threads that I feel do connect these two stories to one another now impact the way I will process information about the casting for whatever the next Rian Johnson whodunit ends up being. For example, if Rian Johnson were to cast a bunch of famous white people and Kelly Marie Tran, I'm automatically going to be suspicious and assume that she will be the heroine of that story. Now, if that were to be true, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing to already know going into watching the third Benoit Blanc whodunit for the first time, since that would still leave the entire remaining ensemble to be a pool of suspects. Having said that, though, even the order of crediting is starting to prove problematic. In both of these films, you have Daniel Craig first, which is understandable because he is the main detective, and he is the only character who will appear in all of these whodunits, however many end up being made. But then you move down, and the second billed star in both of these is the killer, Chris Evans and Edward Norton. And then the third billed star is the heroine protagonist, Ana de Armas and Janelle Monáe. Also, the final end credit is someone who gets murdered, Christopher Plummer and Dave Bautista. Now, I am aware that there are a lot of politics that go into the business practices of who gets credited, where, and when. I think it's perfectly fine to maintain that status quo of ordering when you do the closing credits of the finished film. But in the marketing and the lead up to the release, I think one of the things they might want to consider doing to throw off the scent from people like myself is to just share the names of the main ensemble in alphabetical order. Is it the end of the world for people to start putting clues together before the film comes out? Not necessarily. I think the general audience is not terminally online, and they will not be looking for leaks ahead of a film's release. But if you would like for the loudest people in the room to be less likely to start playing detective when the game is not yet afoot, maybe these are some things to be taken into consideration, whether on the marketing side of things or the storytelling side of things. Maybe Rian Johnson will come up with a story where the so-called heroine who is ostracized by the status quo is actually the killer. You could do a whodunit where that archetype is still present in the story, but that person was actually just pretending to be a good person. They were pretending to be an upstanding activist, only to turn around and steal money from the cause they were fundraising for to buy themselves a mansion. But that's just one hypothetical example. For all I know, maybe Rian already has a story that is vastly different from his first two. Greed and money being so central to the murders and motives is something that, of course, I enjoy, since I have said several times and will continue to say, I love a good eat the rich story. But if we get a motive that is rooted in love, sex, jealousy, or just good old revenge, building a story around one of those motivations might be enough to drastically shift the dynamic of building the ensemble of characters around it. No matter what comes next, though, as always, I know I will be there opening day with a notepad and pen to take notes on different clues to lead up to the big reveal. I also think it's very apparent that Netflix needs to do a longer theatrical run because they can make way more money than they did with just this 1 week release. I have no doubt in my mind. Thank you everyone for watching. Stay tuned for a new video sharing my top 10 or maybe top 15 favorite films of 2022. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe since it helps a small channel like myself to not be forsaken by this website. See you in the next one. Bye.